Hi, I'm Brian Hettinga, and welcome to another edition of the Discover the Word podcast. And I remember Haddon Robinson, who led the Bible studies on Discover the Word for over 20 years, saying repeatedly that while we have a personal faith in Christ, we don't have an individual faith. God never meant us to live life as a Christian alone. And one of the most unfortunate lies we tend to believe is that our faith is just between us and God, because God didn't design us to go about life on our own, but to flourish in community. We need others, and others need us. Friends are an essential part of life. And so for the next two episodes of the Discover the Word podcast, we're going to tug on the thread of friendship as we see it in the Bible and see what unravels. And I think we'll find some things that will strengthen your friendships, assist you in developing a community in which you point one another to Jesus, and help you to become the kind of friend who loves others well. This study is simply called Friendship, and I hope you'll be part of it here on Discover the Word. And it is great to have you here with us. Discover the Word is Bible engagement for life from Our Daily Bread Ministries. And we do take a group approach to studying the Bible. And so for this study, the friends that you'll be studying with are Daniel Ryan Day, Elisa Morgan, Bill Crowder, and Rasul Berry. And Daniel will be leading us to a number of passages and stories in the Bible that have a friendship factor to them that will help us to understand more deeply why that is such an important observation, that we indeed do have a personal faith, but not an individual faith. And I think each of these stories Daniel will point us to will teach us something about what it looks like to lean into friendship, both friendship with God and our friendships with others. All right, so let's pull our chairs up to the table with the group and get started.
Okay, what are some of your favorite memories, and how many of them include other people?
Well, it's hard to really nail down favorite memories when you've got 70 years worth of memories. I mean,
you got more than 70.
well, I know. I was being kind to myself.
I did say some of.
Oh,
So
well,
you don't have to pick one.
okay. It depends on what stage of life we're talking about. I mean, some of my favorite memories are traveling with my wife to do Bible conferences in different countries around the world and stuff.
Yeah. You know, I go straight to an annual gathering that I participate in every year and have for, I think, maybe 20 years. And it's with 4 other girlfriends. And we go to different places. It's usually to somebody's house. You know, like we're not in the same town, so we'll, trade off going places. But we call ourselves the Fab Five, which is just, kind of annoying, but we like it. So we keep it. And we are, by the way, fabulous. So that's why. But we just unpack life together.
Yeah. I have a lot of favorite memories, and most of them, probably all of them, include other people, and often friends. And what is that? What are some of the dynamics that happen when you hang out with other people, with people we consider friends, that make those so special?
I think the shared memory piece is what's so special.
Yeah, I just think it's almost like you get to enhance the experience that you have because you get to see it reflected in different people and all the little differences, and like how, because of shared experiences in the past, you can just kind of look at each other and it has all this meaning and significance because like a shared joke, an inside joke with friends. Like it's just this special thing that only has happened because of a relationship. It wouldn't quite feel the same by yourself.
Well, it's kind of the truth around this table. We've been sitting here together for several years, and we always sit in the same spots.
Yep.
We always have the same mics. We always have the same things we drink or eat, etc. And we can look at each other and give a snide comment or, know exactly what we mean
Usually
by a look.
off mic.
Yeah. In fact, when we were going around the circle, Lisa, I could have guessed which story you would have told because I've heard you talk about the Fab Five before. And I think for me, the thing that makes those memories pretty special is usually there's a lot of laughter. And that's one of the things that I just love about being with other people, is like deep belly laughing, those types of experiences. Obviously, sometimes it's going through really hard things together. And you feel like you're really in the trenches together, or maybe one person in the group's going through something really hard, but you're not alone. The burdens are halved in that way. And then there's something about relationships and other people that teaches us about disagreement too. And we live in a world where typically if we disagree with someone, that's supposed to be the end of a relationship. But in deep friendships, disagreement, stress, problems, those are an invitation into even deeper relationship instead of ending a relationship. And so I thought it would be fun to start there because friendship is also a theme that shows up in the Bible. And I thought maybe for the next couple weeks, we could spend time looking at the theme of friendship in the Bible and see what it teaches us about our relationship with God, about our relationships with one another, and see how that shapes us. So to start, I thought we'd start with maybe the most difficult theological idea we have, but I think it's really important to start here, which is the idea of the Trinity. So what is the definition of the Trinity? And when I say the definition, I'm saying that with the caution of whenever people try to nail this down, they usually end up saying something heretical. But just like, what is the definition of the Trinity?
God in three persons, blessed Trinity.
God in three persons, but three gods?
No.
One God.
No, one God,
Three persons.
three persons.
Father,
right?
Son, Holy Spirit. Yeah.
Yep, and there's been a lot of theological work on defining terms like person. We're not going to get into that part today.
Thank you.
But I do want us to read a passage that it's probably one of the clearest pictures we have of the Trinity and maybe one of the most beautiful as well. So Matthew 3, verses 13 through 17. And maybe Elisa, you could read that for us.
Then Jesus came from Galilee to John at the Jordan to be baptized by him. John would have prevented him, saying, I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me? But Jesus answered him, Let it be so now, for it is proper for us in this way to fulfill all righteousness. Then he consented. And when Jesus had been baptized, just as he came up from the water, suddenly the heavens were opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased.
All right, so what are the three persons of the Trinity that we see in this story?
Well, we see the Son, Jesus, being baptized. Then we see the Spirit of God descending like a dove, whatever like a dove
Means,
and then the voice of the Father saying, This is my Son.
Yeah. And where kind of are we in this story now, specifically the Jesus story?
This is the kind of the formal launching of his public ministry.
Yeah. And that's part of the baptism itself, symbolically, is representing Jesus starting or initiating his public ministry. And there's a whole tradition there of like prophets going into the Jordan as kind of a renewal movement of going all the way back to when Israel crossed the Jordan to come in the promised land the first time. So they go back and they re-enter the Jordan as kind of a, hey, we're going to remind them of what it means to follow God again, right? So there's this initiation of Jesus's public ministry, this kind of tradition of going into the Jordan. And then we have the other two persons of the Trinity show up in a way that I think is pretty important. So the Spirit does what, Rasul?
It says descends like a dove and rests or alights on Jesus.
And we see Jesus go into the wilderness right after this, experience temptation, and then the angels come and like strengthen him after that. But there's this sense of the Spirit goes with him through Jesus's ministry, right?
And it's interesting because most of the time when the Spirit is talked about, it's not physically seen. And here that it's an actual dove is fascinating. The Father's not seen. He's only heard.
Yeah. And what does the Father say?
It says, This is my Son whom I love. I love this passage.
Yeah.
My beloved. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's this audible like blessing, commissioning, honoring of Jesus. So I think as we think about relationships in general, this is an important place to start because it shows that God himself is relational, right? In three persons. And one of the things that John in particular talks about a lot is that God is love. And if God has been love forever and is love, then there's this question of like, well, if God's by himself, how can he love, right? Because love requires someone to receive it from and someone to give it to. And so as we think about relationships, there's this relationship that's gone on forever which is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit interacting together.
I think it also gives us a glimpse of a love that is not necessary. Like if you don't understand that God didn't need to create, like, so you could have this idea that, oh, well, he needed people because he was lonely.
Yeah.
But then you realize God was never lonely. So the creation itself is a reflection of his benevolence and kindness and grace, which is in and of itself a great model for us to think about friendship and love, right? It's not because I need anything that I have a friend or we develop one. It's because we, in the best case scenario, enjoy each other's company.
Yeah.
And that is the foundation.
And that's kind of what God invites people into when he creates them, is into this relationship that God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit already had, this friendship. In fact, throughout the scriptures, God, in talking about other people, references them as friends. In James 2:23, for example, Bill, could you just read that for us real quick?
Sure.
Listen for that word friend in there.
Thus the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness, and he was called the friend of God.
The friend of God. And then Moses talked to God as what?
A friend.
As a friend. And then Jesus, when he talks about his disciples, and then he ends up praying for those who would believe because of the disciples, so us, how does he refer to his closest followers and those who will follow
His friends.
after? His
That's
friends.
in John 15, yeah.
And so I think this is an important place to start. It's this idea that God himself is love. God himself shares this friendship between the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And then as he thinks about us and who we are, he's inviting us into friendship with him. And so I think that'll be a really good place to start as we explore the theme of friendship.
Yeah, I think that is a great place to start because the Bible traces the story of this relational God, inviting humans closer than they ever thought possible. God hardwired into us this need for community and relationship. And so we're going to look at some stories involving Moses and David and Job and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and then Jesus. Friendship stories. Friendship is a significant thread we're going to pull on and come to understand more clearly how crucial friendship with God and friendship with others is. We do have a personal faith, but we don't have an individual faith. We need others, and others need us. And so, are you familiar with the phrase, I got your six? Essentially, it means, I've got your back. I've got you covered. I'm backing you up. And so there's no need to worry because I'm there to help you out and you'll be safe with me there. It's a phrase that comes from the military where they use an analog clock to refer to position. So 12 o'clock would be straight ahead, 3 o'clock to your right, 9 o'clock to your left, and 6 o'clock directly behind you. So I got your six, I've got your back. Well, in this next segment, they're going to look at a familiar I got your six story from the Old Testament.
I'm going to throw 3 questions together, okay? When was the last time you stood up for someone or someone stood up for you? And it could be that the first memory that comes to mind is when someone didn't stand up for you. So, go.
It's hard to talk about ones where you stood up for someone because it makes you feel like you're the hero of your own story. And so I want to avoid those. A time when someone did not stand up for me, I confided in one of the elders of our church. Not only did they not stand up for me, but they took it and ran with it and spread it. And I ended up losing that role as a result. It was unfortunate.
It's tough. That
That
hurts.
really hurts.
And I have a similar one in leadership of a nonprofit. I had a particularly difficult conversation to go have with another leader, not in our ministry. And there was a colleague who had committed to going with me. And the morning I was driving to the appointment, my colleague called and said they wouldn't be able to go, so they left me alone. And God was with me. I knew it. It was amazing. And on the drive there, I saw God provide. He just, through the Spirit, he just reminded me of a few things and gave me things to say. But I felt ill-equipped and let down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember, again, another not being stood up for. So I guess there's a pattern here. Just being teased, middle school, rough time. I don't know whoever says middle school was the best years of my life, but just one particular moment, I struck out with the bases loaded, and my favorite player was Mike Schmidt, and they decided to call me a take on Mike Schmidt that was not very pleasant, chanted me off the field, and as I walked in tears. So, and then I didn't play baseball anymore for like another 4 years.
Yeah, I bet. Isn't that interesting? For all of us, the easiest example, the quickest example that comes to mind is one where we wish someone had stood up for us. Yeah. I have a similar type of situation to the work examples of working in a job where one leader decided that I shouldn't be there anymore, but the other leader that I was closest to was a good friend. And I didn't hear anything from him. And it was one of those like super heartbreaking moments for me. And yeah, it hurts on a whole deeper level when there's someone that we think we're closer to, or maybe we are closer to, and this is one of the mistakes they make, right? Where they should have stood up. Yeah. And I think it shows something in all of us that we all long to have those people in our lives that do have our back and are going to stand up for us if something's going on. In fact, of someone standing up for me, even though maybe it was just her sharing it with me, was a situation where I'd been treated really unfairly, and my wife got really angry.
That feels so good.
Right? And her being angry on my behalf.
Don't poke the bear.
Felt really good.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've had that too. There were times when Marlene, who's just about the calmest person I've ever known, there were times when I was pastoring that people were saying things and stuff like that, and she kind of came to my defense, and that was
it's very powerful,
shocking, but it was also pretty wonderful.
Yeah. Well, the book of 1 Samuel has a story in it, and it might be the most well-known friendship story in the Bible. If you asked someone who kind of is familiar with the Bible, like, tell me a friendship story, this might be the one that comes to mind first. And it's where the prince of a growing kingdom stands up to his dad, the king, which that has a whole level of risk to it, for his closest friend. And so before we read it, I want to set up the context. It begins with a guy named Saul. So who was Saul? And this is the Old Testament.
He was the first king of Israel.
Yeah, and maybe we can just read it, actually. 1 Samuel 9, verses 1 through 2.
There was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, son of Abiel, son of Zeror, son of Bechorath, son of Aphiah, a Benjamite, a man of wealth. He had a son whose name was Saul, a handsome young man. There was not a man among the people of Israel more handsome than he. He stood head and shoulders above everyone else.
All right, so there's kind of 3 criteria that show up that make Saul the kind of king everybody looks at and goes, yeah, he should be king. The first is, did his family have or not have money?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, man of wealth.
Man of wealth.
Yeah.
Yep. And then what do we learn about Saul himself?
He's handsome.
And he's
tall.
Yeah.
And in the ancient world, one of the things that was pretty common among kings is usually they were larger or bigger, or at least described that way later, whether they were or not. So that idea of standing head and shoulders above everyone else, we get this picture right away of money, height. He's handsome. This is the guy, right, that everybody wants to be king.
And it actually makes sense, because when the people request a king, they say, we want a king like the nations. And so they were looking for a king that would fit the criteria that the surrounding nations used, not necessarily the criteria that the God of Israel would have wanted them to choose. So it does make sense.
Yeah. So in the ancient world, what were the 3 primary roles for a king?
He'd lead the army.
Administer the kingdom.
Which included what?
Administering justice.
Justice, yep.
And honoring God.
Yeah,
Worship.
or the gods if you're in a nation that had multiple gods or something like that. So leading the army, promoting justice, honoring the gods, making sure things go the way that they're supposed to go. And how did Saul do it first?
He did good.
Yeah.
Pretty well, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Saul also had a son. What was his son's name?
Jonathan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Jonathan was pretty battle savvy. Do you remember, and you can look this up real quick if you want a refresher, 1 Samuel 14. What happens in that little story?
So there's a scenario where they're battling the Philistines, and Jonathan decides to, with his armor bearer.
Yeah. So how many?
2 people.
2 people.
Just come up and, do this very aggressive and risky maneuver, and it turns the tide of the whole battle.
Yeah. He says, nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have this sense of like, okay, so Jonathan's kind of following in the footsteps of his dad. He's also battle savvy. That's going to be good because leading the army is one of the key things about that a king needs to be able to do. So it starts off well. We get to 1 Samuel 15, and things start to kind of fall apart for Saul. What happens there?
Saul is commanded to wipe out the Amalekites and all of their livestock and all that stuff because of things they did to the children of Israel as they were in the Exodus. And Saul does partial obedience. He keeps the king alive and a lot of the livestock. Samuel shows up and kind of tears him down brick by brick for disobedience.
Yeah.
His partial obedience was seen as total disobedience in that sense.
Yep. And so something is going to happen as a result of that.
God rejects him.
A new king is going to be anointed.
Yep. So from that point forward, we can kind of imagine that there's a little bit of fear in Saul.
Yeah.
Right? Like, who's this king going to be? He's going to feel threatened from this point forward. And then we get to chapter 17, and what happens in chapter 17?
Well, David has been anointed as the new king, not crowned yet, but he fights Goliath.
And does that go well?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good.
So David defeats Goliath. Saul actually promotes David to lead the army. Jonathan and David become best friends after the Goliath story. That's where we see that. And then, unfortunately, David's fame starts to outpace Saul's.
Yeah.
And in the ancient world, that's a problem because it's pretty common for someone in the army to get more popular, to overthrow the king, and to bring in a new order into the kingdom.
Yeah, military coup.
Yep. And so it makes sense that maybe there's some fear there. And so that brings us to 1 Samuel 19. So far, Saul has been threatening David, and this is where he decides that it really is time for David to die. So let's read verses 1 through 7 together. Maybe, Elisa, you could get us started.
Sure. Saul spoke with his son Jonathan and with all his servants about killing David. But Saul's son Jonathan took great delight in David. Jonathan told David, "My father Saul's trying to kill you. Therefore be on guard tomorrow morning. Stay in a secret place, and I will hide you. I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak to my father about you. If I learn anything, I will tell you."
Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul, his father, and said to him, "Let not the king do wrong to his servant David. He has not wronged you, and what he has done has benefited you greatly. He took his life in his hands when he killed the Philistine. The Lord won a great victory for all Israel, and you saw it and were glad. Why then would you do wrong to an innocent man like David by killing him for no reason?"
Saul heeded the voice of Jonathan. Saul swore, "As the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death." So Jonathan called David and related all these things to him. Jonathan then brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before.
So do you see someone standing up for someone else? Yeah.
And speaking truth to power
Yeah.
at the same time.
And very reasonable. Like,
Right.
he just lays it out so thoughtfully to be like, "Hey, Pop, what are you doing?" But also at great personal potential risk because, if the prophecy moves forward, then that means Jonathan is not going to be the heir to the throne.
Yeah. And it's at risk for himself as well because he's the son of the king pushing back on the king.
Right.
And anytime you push back against a king, that can also not go well for you. It's not unheard of for a king to kill people in his own family if they stand up against him, right?
Yes.
Especially throughout history. And so Saul decides David needs to die. Jonathan, and notice all the "I will" statements. Jonathan tells David, I will go out and stand by my father. I will speak to my father. I will tell you what happens. So he's very active in this, defending David, arguing on behalf of David, putting his own life at risk for David. Yeah, so as we think about going back to where we started this conversation, we talked about all the times we wish someone had stood up for us. Mm-hmm. There is something about friendship, at least in this story, where we see someone care so much about someone else that they're willing to put their reputation on the line. They're willing to risk even their own life in this situation for someone else. And so, there's this sense of loyalty, this sense of friendship, this sense of care that Jonathan has for David. Is there anything else that stands out to you in this friendship story?
Well, I love the way they end, that
Mm-hmm.
they really speak their love to each other. And sometimes we get uncomfortable with that and think, well, that's kind of overboard. But it isn't. It's this commitment. And, they don't have long to live.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Jonathan doesn't. And it's a beautiful expression. It kind of reminds me of Ruth and Naomi.
Yep.
A little bit of just their commitment of no matter what, love.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, too, whenever we run into a story like this, we have the opportunity, one of the things that we talk about a lot is like, what does it look like to see Jesus in all of these stories? Mm-hmm. And Jesus, who calls us friends, puts his reputation on the line and risks everything on behalf. And that leads actually to his death. Beautiful. And so I think even this story pushes us forward as well to thinking about who Jesus is and what Jesus did for us as well. And I just want to acknowledge that for us, right, we talked about stories where we didn't have someone stand up for us. There's probably a lot of people that are joining us who also feel that and wish maybe even right now that someone stood up for them. And that's where I think having that reminder of what Jesus did for us is so helpful. Mm-hmm. Because even if we don't have someone right now to stand up for us or to care for us or who didn't stand up for us and we wish they had, even Jesus understands that and can meet us in that pain. And he's ultimately the one who laid down his life for us. And so we have this Old Testament story of friendship and loyalty and allegiance, which leads us to the story of Jesus, who also cares for us. And he's the ultimate prince who made things right for us. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's an important thing for us to have someone in life who has our six, has our back. And it's important that we are that person for those we love as well. And it's also important for us to remember that God is that for us, always. Well, we're looking at some friendship stories in Scripture, exploring how they can impact our relationship with God and our friendships with those in our lives. Because God made us for friendship with Him and friendship with others. Well, the next friendship story is one where friends, and I'm using air quotes when I say that, when friends don't act like friends. That is so disappointing and disillusioning, isn't it? When people you thought were friends don't act like it. That's tough to take, isn't it? I'm sure you know what I mean. And so if you've got some of that going on, we'll talk about it on the other side of this short break. Now, Daniel is leading this Discover the Word study, but he also leads our Reclaim Today team here at Our Daily Bread Ministries, and that aspect of the ministry reaches out to young adults in their 20s and 30s by helping them read and understand the Bible so they can hear from and know and follow God in their everyday lives. And recent research revealed that young adults struggle with friendship. So Daniel's Reclaim Today team created a resource called 7 Bible Stories to Deepen Your Friendships. This booklet encourages you to explore how God uses relationships to form us and how to become the kind of friend that God is to us. I think it'd be a great companion to our conversations on Discover the Word. Hope you'll check it out for yourself or for the young adults in your life. Again, it's called 7 Bible Stories to Deepen Your Friendships. And we'll have a link to it in our show notes for this episode at discovertheword.org. And I will tell you a little more about this later on in the podcast as well. Well, the story in the Bible that Daniel and Elisa and Bill and Rasul will go to next will help us to learn from a negative example, how not to be a good friend. It's more of a, with friends like that, who needs enemies story. So, Daniel?
When was the last time you went through something tough, something really hard, and your friends weren't much help?
Yeah, I remember back when I had a car before I lived in New York City, when my car broke down, and
there you go.
most of my friends were artists who did not have any experience, and so there was nothing they could do to help me with my car.
Broken down car.
Yeah.
They just didn't. It wasn't that they didn't want to; they just couldn't.
I got nothing.
Got nothing. Okay.
Sorry.
All right. So maybe I'll throw out some types of things that can happen in these situations. Maybe it'll help us a little bit. Maybe a situation where you were looking for advice and someone started giving advice and it wasn't helpful at all.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or a situation where you just wanted someone to be with you because you were going through something hard and they started offering advice about how to fix whatever. Or someone who tries to fix a problem for you, but they don't even know what the real problem is before they try to fix it.
Yeah. And I've been that person too.
Oh, absolutely.
Hey, let me help you. I'm sure I can fix this. And no, I can't.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's tough when you share some news or some information of something that's just happened that was hard, and you really just want the person to just feel like, man, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But out of a genuine sense of wanting to be helpful, spring into solution mode. And like you said, I definitely have been guilty of that as well. But yeah, it kind of is deflating because you just really wanted a listening ear and some empathy, not a solution.
Right.
Yeah. And that's when you know, oh man, okay, they missed why I wanted to talk with them about this. How do we feel in a situation like that?
Missed is a great word. Just missed. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a story in the Bible, specifically in the book of Job, where the main character experiences literally the worst the world has to offer. And his friends show up. And at first, they act like great companions at first. And so before we read that story, let's get some context. And I think you'll see what I mean. So first, Job is what type of literature in the Bible?
Wisdom literature.
Wisdom literature. And what are some of the other books of wisdom literature in the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible?
It's Proverbs.
Yep.
Ecclesiastes.
Yep.
Some include Song of Solomon in the wisdom literature. Not everybody does, but some do.
Yep, and we talked about this a little bit in our Ecclesiastes series, but Proverbs offers kind of the positive side of wisdom. So it offers these principles that if you kind of live and do these types of things, typically better things happen to you. And if you avoid these types of things, typically that's good. I say typically because they're not promises, but it's kind of the positive side. And then Ecclesiastes is the other side, which is kind of the, oh yeah, Proverbs? Well, I've seen people do the right things and the worst things happen to them. Yeah. And I've seen people that do all the wrong things and good things happen to them.
Which is a lot of the lament psalms are that same way.
Yes.
Absolutely. And then we have Job here kind of in the middle of those three. And Job is described as the most righteous person that the world pretty much has ever seen. He's the epitome of what it looks like to try to do your best, to try to do good things, and yet all the worst things in the world happen to him. And it's a perfect story for a lot of the really hard life questions we run into, like, why do bad things happen to good people? Job is a good place to explore a question like that. Another question, what's Job going to do when he suffers? Is he going to stay faithful to God or is he not? So quickly, what happens to Job? What are all the bad things that happen?
His kids are killed, his animals, livestock, produce, it's all ruined or destroyed. And his wife tells him to curse God and die.
Part of the thing that I think really makes the story so overwhelming is the cumulative effect of it.
Yeah.
Because in each time a messenger comes and says, raiders came and took all your sheep. And while he was still speaking, another one came. And while he was still speaking,
like
another
dominoes.
one came. Yeah, just like a series of tsunamis hitting him all at once.
And he gets sick. What kind of sick?
I mean, boils in his skin and like scraping stuff off. It's really seemingly just the worst type of pain, and not just pain, but also kind of gross.
And that's when Job's friends show up. So could someone read Job 2, verses 11 through 13 for us?
I can do that. Job 2, 11 through 13. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all these troubles that had come upon him, each of them set out from his home, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They met together to go and console and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they raised their voices and wept aloud. They tore their robes and threw dust in the air upon their heads. They sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great.
Whew.
And that's about the time they decide to add to his suffering.
Yeah. But first, where do they start?
They start by sitting with him, which is awesome.
And weeping when they see him.
Yeah. And why do you feel like that's an appropriate response in this
Well, we were
setting?
talking earlier about how meaningful it is when someone just comes and enters your world rather than trying to fix you or moralize what you're going through.
Yep. What makes it so hard to respond to a friend who's suffering?
You want to fix them. You don't want them to be in pain.
Yeah. And then there's also a discomfort that we feel with suffering, right? Where we don't know what to say. And so there's 2 ways we can respond to that. We can stay quiet, which usually is the better way, or
We can say the wrong thing.
we can say the wrong thing. And what did Job's friends end up doing from here? You kind of alluded
They
to
said
it,
a
Bill.
lot of really wrong things.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And the thing about it is that they were doing what we always try to do. We always go for the why.
Yeah.
Why is this happening? And one thing we know about the Old Testament is that the Bible does not move from error to truth. It moves from incompleteness to completeness. And so we have a lot more information than they had in the Old Testament about many things, including what happens after you die. But as a result of that, they tried to resolve all the issues of life in this life on these terms. And so there had to be a problem in Job's life, or else none of these things would be happening to him. And obviously, we find out that Job goes on the defensive.
Yeah. And if we can put ourselves in Job's place, how would we have wanted our friends to respond in this story?
You know, I think one of the things, in addition, I mean, the first thing is empathy, you know, and which they kind of start there with the weeping and the silence, and then I think prematurely jump into solution mode. I think the other thing is maybe more curiosity.
Yeah.
I think then definitiveness.
I heard this statement a while back that certainty can become a weapon. And, you know, especially certainty about what we think God's doing, it can be weaponized against the suffering. And that's really, I think maybe what you're getting at, Daniel, is humility. You know, that we assume a posture of humility. This could be me. This is me.
Yeah. And would it be that bad if we really feel like we need to say something, to just ask?
Yeah.
How would you like me to be with you in this suffering?
That's good, because they might say, oh, give me some wisdom.
Right.
Or they might say, don't try and say anything.
Yeah. Like,
Or they might say, go
we
away.
Can we just be here? Or could you give me some space or something like that? All
That's
of which
great,
would be
Daniel.
a good way to honor them in that way. So Job's friends start in that spot. They heard about their friend's misfortune. They came to him. They cried with him. They tore their robes in empathy. Finally, they didn't offer advice or fix things at first, but they simply sat with him. What a beautiful picture of what it looks like to suffer with people. But then, again, they started offering advice. But there's another thing that I see in this story, which is how God reacts to us in suffering. So there's a theme in the Bible of God coming close to people in suffering. He does with Job. In fact, how does Job end? If you look at the last few chapters, God comes and he gives a speech that is kind of jarring at first, I think. But where it ends up is Job looks and goes, I had heard about you, but now I've seen you. Job knew God's presence at the end of this book. God came close. Jesus, when his friends were suffering, he wept with them. Jesus sent the advocate as a helper for us when we experience weaknesses and pain. And so there is this story of God coming close to us. And just as God meets us in our suffering and comforts us, so can we, with God's help, meet others in their suffering. And instead of bad advice, maybe it would be better just to be present with people when they're suffering and in places where words might fail.
Yeah, we can learn a lot from negative examples, can't we? And in this case, we can learn a lot about what not being a good friend looks like. And as Daniel said, that can help us to be a better friend to someone who's in one of those tough times in life. And then also this teaches us a lot about what God is like. Now, the Bible is primarily a book about God. And so this really does speak volumes about who God is, what he's like, and how he relates to us. Well, we're talking about friendship in the Bible because relationships in general and friendships in particular are a common theme in Scripture. They are an aspect of almost every part of the story. And while we've acknowledged that the Bible is not meant to be primarily a friendship how-to book, the stories that we're looking at do teach us something about what it looks like to lean into friendship with God and friendship with others. Because in so many ways, God built us for community. We need friends, and they need us. And so the story we'll go to next involves one of the most important characters in the Old Testament, Moses. And so an interesting part of the conversation about how friendship works its way into the life of Moses.
I'm going to ask you a question that isn't going to be fun to remember back. When was a time you were laughed at and it hurt deeply?
Yeah, that puts me right back in junior high school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because that's where a lot of that stuff happens. Mm-hmm. It doesn't only happen there, but it seems to happen on a more frequent basis there, I think.
Maybe I can make this more broad so we don't have to be as personal. How does that shape us? How does it shape our self-esteem?
I'm just going to go here. And most of the things that came to mind, Bill, and I don't want to really talk about them, had to do with body parts. And it does go to junior high, and it goes to puberty, and it goes to that very vulnerable, fragile season of human development, but all the issues of embarrassment or shame or discomfort or comparison or whatever pop up. Yeah. And it sears our understanding of ourselves. And, we don't really know how to talk about it in that season.
To add another layer of weight now, you're welcome. Imagine now having to
I like how you're not sharing anything, Daniel. You're just asking the questions.
I've got plenty of stories.
That's good. Okay.
But now imagine God coming to you and saying, okay, I want you to go back to those really vulnerable places in your past, and I'm going to have you go back and be there for a little while. Would you be excited about that?
Honestly, if he was with me, I already know it would be healing. Yeah. Because that's kind of what we do as we therapeutically go to God. But where were you going with that, Daniel?
Yeah. So there's a story in the Bible of a guy who has run away from his past. And God comes to him and says, we're going to go back there together.
Okay.
And for lots of pretty good reasons, he doesn't want to. And I think it would be hard for us to relate to what his past is and why he doesn't want to go back there. But as I think about the parts of my past that I don't want to return to, it's those moments where people laughed at me or where there was shame or where I was misunderstood or something like that. Yeah. And so we'll see if this works to relate to this story or not. And it's the story of Moses in particular, because where was Moses born and what was kind of the setting for his birth?
Well, he was born in Egypt at a time when there was a pharaoh who was concerned about the growth of the Hebrew population, and so had ordered the killing of Hebrew boys. So it was a very dangerous time for him to be born. And he's rescued in what way? His mom puts him in a basket down the Nile, and then providentially the Pharaoh's daughter finds him.
And Pharaoh's daughter adopts him, essentially. So he ends up this Hebrew child raised in the land of Egypt.
Yeah, it's kind of a prince at that point.
He was. And he wasn't raised as a slave, as the rest of the Hebrews were. He was the prince of Egypt over them.
He was given tremendous education,
Mm-hmm.
He was a military leader who won many conquests.
So why does he leave Egypt?
He kills a guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He sees a soldier abusing Hebrew slaves, and
Mm-hmm.
he's incensed. And in a kind of I would say, a righteous anger, he rises up and then acts inappropriately and murders.
Yep.
Yeah.
And buries him in the sand, literally. And then there's another situation.
Right. So then he tries to be a peacemaker, and with the two Hebrews fighting each other, and then one of them makes it clear, oh, what, you're going to do us like you did the Egyptian shoulder. And that's
Yeah.
when he realizes that people know. And then that's when he flees because his life is in danger.
And I'm just imagining as he flees, maybe the shame he feels, the fear.
Mm-hmm.
The fear is definitely driving him at this point in some way. So what kind of happens from there? Let's pick up Exodus 3, verses 1 through 6. This is where God finds Moses. So who would like to start us there?
Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight, and see why the bush is not burned up. And when the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. And then he said, Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you're standing is holy ground. He said further, I'm the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God.
Yeah. So I love that phrase, beyond the wilderness. The idea that Moses is like gone beyond himself at this point. Like he's on the far side of the wilderness, beyond the wilderness, at the end of himself as he's caring for these sheep for his father-in-law, so far removed from being a prince of Egypt at this point. But God meets him there in this really miraculous way. And then he ends up asking Moses to do something. And what is that he asks Moses to do?
He wants him to go and confront Pharaoh
Yeah.
to allow the Hebrews to leave Egypt and to go and worship God.
And based on what we know about the story so far, what are some reasons Moses would not want to go back to
He
Egypt?
doesn't want to get caught. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
He has
I mean,
a past.
Yeah,
right?
he's a fugitive running from the most powerful nation in the world. And he's being tasked with changing their whole social, economic, political system by just making a statement, not with any kind of army.
Yep. And then, so he's afraid for his life. He has a past. And then we find out there's actually even another reason that he's intimidated for this. So let's read Exodus 4, verses 10 through 17. Maybe you could read that for us, Bill.
But Moses said to the Lord, O my Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor even now that you have spoken to your servant, but I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue. Then the Lord said to him, Who gives speech to mortals? Who makes them mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, and I will be your mouth and teach you what you are to speak.
So pause there.
Yeah.
What does God first offer?
Ability.
Yeah. I'll be your voice.
Yeah.
Right? Sure, Moses, I see exactly what you're talking about. And there's probably some shame and fear and embarrassment there for Moses, right? The fact that he brings this up to God. But God's like, I'll meet you there. I'll take care of it. And then continue.
But he said, O Lord, please send someone else. Yeah.
Maybe the most
here am I
honest
standing
prayer
there
in the
and-
Bible.
Yeah, right.
Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, What of your brother Aaron the Levite? I know that he can speak fluently. Even now he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, his heart will be glad. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you what you shall do. He indeed shall speak for you to the people. He shall serve as a mouth for you, and you shall serve as God for him. Take in your hand this staff with which you shall perform the signs.
Yeah. So what was the reason that Moses gave for not wanting to go this time?
Well, his mouth, that he
Yeah.
couldn't speak
Yeah.
appropriately.
And he may have had like some really complicated reason, right?
Well, and the fact is that when you get into Acts 7 and Stephen talks about Moses, he says that he was a man powerful in words. I mean, back
Yeah.
in his time in
Yeah.
Egypt with his education and everything, he was very eloquent. So all those years beyond the wilderness have
stifled him, or
yeah.
Yep. And how does God respond?
Once again, by saying, I have you. Like,
I got you.
will provide all that you need. Now go.
Yep. And when Moses pushes back on God being his voice, he asks, please send someone else. And then God meets him again by offering Aaron. And I find it so comforting that even in God's frustration with Moses, he gives Moses what he needs for the job. And that is an amazing thing. And one of the things that Moses needs that God gives him is his brother Aaron as a companion, as a friend, as an ally to go with him.
A helper.
And so I think this highlights one of the themes in the Bible that we see, which is God does not condemn human frailty, but always works through it. And I think there's a friendship principle here, which is a good friend isn't embarrassed by what we're ashamed of either, but is someone who comes and meets us even in that and supports us and cares for us and works with us. And that's really what the church is supposed to be, right? Is like a collection of friends, which we'll talk about in another conversation, where we all work together for the good of the world and serving God together. And we get that glimpse of that in this story. And I think the other thing that's really important for us is the fact that the story of the Bible also says that even when we have no one else to rely on, God himself offers to be our help and to be our friend. And that's really the best news in this story.
A friendship story involving Moses and some key things about God and his provision and his always being with us, coupled with that human friendship piece that is such a critical part of all of our stories. We're spending a couple of episodes of the podcast exploring some Bible stories that can deepen our friendships in this Discover the Word study simply called Friendship. And we will close out part one with friendship forged in the face of adversity. Those kinds of friendships often highlight the importance of relationships in overcoming challenges. When we face difficult situations, having the support of friends can make all the difference.
There's a phrase we even use sometimes. We'll say something like, we went through the fire together.
Yeah.
And I think that phrase might have roots in a story in the Bible where there was a few friends who literally go through the fire together.
And when you say literally, you mean not like Gen Z literally.
Yeah.
You mean literally.
Like literally.
Yeah, and so they'll explore the concept of friendships forged in the face of adversity after a short reminder. Now, as we study some biblical examples of friendship in these two editions of the podcast, I want you to know about a resource that may help you deepen your friendship with God and your friendships with others. 7 Bible Stories to Deepen Your Friendships is a Bible study guide that explores 7 Bible passages by, first of all, emphasizing what the story says about God, and then focusing on the characters and the history and the context of the story. Now, in addition to being part of the Discover the Word team, Daniel leads our Reclaim Today team here at Our Daily Bread Ministries, which helps young adults in their 20s and 30s read and understand the Bible so they can hear from and know and follow God in their everyday lives. And that Reclaim Today team created this booklet as a guide for discipling young men and young women. There will be a link to 7 Bible stories to deepen your friendships in our show notes for this week at discovertheword.org. I encourage you to check it out. And now let's wrap up part 1 with one of my favorite Bible stories from the Old Testament. It just so happens it is a friendship story. It's the story of Rack, Shack, and Benny, as the old VeggieTales episode used to call it. 3 friends and a friendship forged in the face of adversity.
When was the last time you were in a community that faced a challenge?
Right now.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing.
Right now.
Mm-hmm.
Where we used to live on North Carolina's coast, we'd get the occasional hurricane, and you'd really see people pulling together to help each other, to kind of get beyond the damage, helping clean up debris and fallen trees and things like that. I mean, it's really amazing how people jump in and help someone else when they've got plenty of their own that they could be concerned about.
Yeah.
New York City is not known for affordable rent conditions, and what is true on an individual scale is even 10 times the case on commercial real estate. So our church has a commitment to stay in downtown Brooklyn, but we are now in our 4th building in 10 years and need to find another place and have had doors closed and challenges. And so we've just been praying and fasting and even working through the difficulties of folks that aren't really trying to be very helpful. Yeah.
Maybe we could summarize those seasons as like pressure-filled circumstances. And there's a phrase we even use sometimes. We'll say something like, we went through the fire together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that phrase might have roots in a story in the Bible where there was a few friends who literally go through the fire together, which we'll look at.
When you say literally, you mean not like Gen Z literally.
Yeah.
You mean literally.
Like literally. And we'll see that in a second. Before we read it, let's set up the context. So we've got this King Nebuchadnezzar. Who is that?
King of Babylon.
And Babylon is what at this point?
Probably the most powerful kingdom in the known world at that point. And he leads his armies and they besiege Jerusalem into something that is just savage, brutal.
So he loots the city, but he does it in a way that is surprising to us because he doesn't just take all the stuff.
Yeah.
He also takes very particular types of people. Yeah. In fact, he leaves most of the poor, the vulnerable.
Yeah.
But who does he take?
The noble people,
The
the people of wealth, of education, with the idea of assimilating them into the Babylonian culture, forces them to learn the educational system, the culture, the food, to essentially assimilate into his culture and leave behind thing that they had learned before.
Yeah, it's the result of the many self-destructive decisions they've made. They've also brought this on themselves to some extent in the story. Yeah.
Most of the time when God disciplines us, it's because we brought it on ourselves. I mean, most of the time that's, I think, pretty true.
Yeah. So they're trying to assimilate them.
Right.
But we get to the book of Daniel, and there's this one guy named
Daniel.
And how well do they assimilate him?
Well, he finds ways of resisting and the desire to be faithful to God at first, and navigating this very, tricky situation by really wisely engaging with the people who are over him. So first it was the food. Hey, we can do better if we just give us vegetables.
And he's probably only about 17 years old when all this is going on.
What a guy. Yeah.
And so he does this little test, kind of evident the origins of the Daniel fast that we talk about today. They look great. They're stronger. And so he continues to keep himself pure according to the dietary standards of the law and having favor, in the court, and their influence and favor he and his friends grows.
Right?
Yeah.
Let me eat these foods. Let's see what the results are. And they're stronger, they're healthier. And so it makes the leader who he convinced actually look pretty good. And so we have this story of the food. And then there's another story of Daniel staying faithful. What's that one?
Daniel in the lion's den.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
Yeah. So this was a scenario where his faithfulness runs at the crosshairs of the political elite who essentially snitch for their own purposes, that he's not bowing down to the statue of Nebuchadnezzar and just their idolatrous practices. And so as a result of that, he has to deal with the punishment of that which the king unwittingly, agrees to, which is to put him in the lion's den. But that God still protects him in that situation.
So by the time we get to Daniel 3, we already have multiple stories of them trying to assimilate these guys and them staying faithful instead. And so in Daniel 3, King Nebuchadnezzar sets up a very, very large statue, and he also sets up kind of a loyalty test. And what's this loyalty test?
Well, when they hear the sound of instruments, horn, pipe, etc., they're supposed to fall down and worship the statue.
And enter Daniel's 3 friends. And so what do the 3 friends do?
They refuse again.
They refuse.
Obedient disobedience.
There you go.
And let's see how Nebuchadnezzar responds. Bill, if you could start Daniel 3, verses 13 through 26 for us.
Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, otherwise known as Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, those are their Hebrew names, be brought in. So they brought those men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar said to them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods and you do not worship the golden statue that I've set up? Now, if you're ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, an entire musical ensemble, to fall down and worship the statue that I've made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. And who is the God that will deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to present a defense to you in this matter. If our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire and out of your hand, O king, let him deliver us. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, and we will not worship the golden statue that you have set up.
Then Nebuchadnezzar was so filled with rage against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his face was distorted. He ordered the furnace heated up 7 times more than was customary, and ordered some of the strongest guards in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to throw them into the furnace of blazing fire. So the men were bound, still wearing their tunics, their trousers, their hats, and their other garments. And they were thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. Because the king's command was so urgent and the furnace was so overheated, the raging flames killed the men who lifted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But the 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the furnace of blazing fire.
So this story is so literary.
Yeah.
Whoever the person is telling the story, King Nebuchadnezzar is so mad, so filled with rage, that it says his face was distorted, right? Like whoever's pulling this story together is just painting a beautiful picture, or a very ugly picture maybe, about what rage can do to us.
But the rage is so severe that you would think if he was that angry, he would want them to suffer more. So you'd turn the heat down so that they would suffer more and longer. But he turns it up and it evaporates the guards that throw them in.
Yeah, so it does destroy, but who does he end up destroying?
His own guards.
His own, and not just guards, the mighty men of, right? So Nebuchadnezzar, in his anger, has, and we see the furnace heated up almost to match his anger. But what happens to the 3 friends?
Hair on them is singed.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Their clothes are there. They're alive and well.
Yep. And then a 4th person shows up in the fire.
Yes.
And some people think that this might be a picture of Jesus in the Old Testament showing up to be with them. Worst case, it's an angel of the Lord who's sent by God to be with them in the fire to rescue them.
That's not very bad, though.
Yep, that's right. And I think what's cool about this story is it reminds me of something that my mom has said my whole life, which is the people you hang out with really matter. Because you have 3 friends together who stand up together and have accountability to one another. And there's this picture of them being faithful to God together. When we go through hard things, there's something amazing when we have people to go through hard things together with. There's friendship that pulls us through hard times, that when we even run into moments in our lives where it would be hard to be faithful to what God has called us to, even there, friends can help us and hold us accountable and be with us. But I think, of course, the most important part of this story isn't just the 3 friends together, but it's the fact that God himself shows up in the furnace. Whether it's sending an angel or whether it's Jesus himself, God comes with us into the hardest things that we face and walks through it with us. And that's a really important part of this story that we can't miss.
And that is part 1 of our study called Friendship, exploring stories that help us understand how our friendship with God is so often mirrored in our friendships with others. As we've been saying throughout this episode, God wired us for relationship with him and relationship with others. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that's one of my favorite stories. You're listening to Discover the Word, and you're at the table with Daniel Ryan Day, Elisa Morgan, Bill Crowder, and Rasul Berry. And so in part 2, we will fast forward to the New Testament and some friendship stories from that part of the Bible. And obviously, many of them will involve Jesus. And our hope is that we'll be able to take the lessons from our perfect example, Jesus, and the other principles available in these stories as well, and apply them to our lives. Because friendship with God leads to deeper relationships with one another. And these relationships are a primary catalyst for who we will become. That's why this friendship study is so important. Well, Discover the Word is a group Bible study from Our Daily Bread Ministries in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in which we invite you to walk with us through topics and passages that inform the way we read the Scriptures, challenge us as we live our lives as followers of Christ, and always point us to discover Jesus in the pages of the Bible. And just so you know, we are a donor-funded nonprofit ministry, and it's the generous support of listeners like you that makes it possible for us to fuel a global Bible engagement movement. If you'd like to partner with us financially, just go to discovertheword.org and click the Donate button that's up at the top of the page. Thanks. And thanks for listening. I'm Brian Heading. Discover the Word is provided by Our Daily Bread